Hello, everyone. I'm Buddy Pittman, and I was fortunate enough to be able to be one of the producers of this program, but we had a lot of help from a lot of great people to be able to do this. We hope you've had a chance to watch the entire program. If you haven't, you can go online and watch it anytime on WUCF.org. And I also want to thank the folks who helped make this. Some guests we have with us this evening. Jim Clark, a professor and senior lecturer in the history department out at UCF. He wrote many books, including Presidents in Florida, and he was one of the producers of this program. So, Jim, thank you for being with us, for all your help with that. Also joining us this evening, Laurie Walters, a historian, particularly with the space program in Brevard County. She works in the modeling, simulation, and training in the history department. And also Amy Foster, an associate professor of history at UCF. And among the classes that she teaches includes classes on the history of the space program and also women in space, which we'll get into a little later. So thank you all first for being here with us this evening for this discussion. And thank you all for all of your help and all your information and all your knowledge in helping us do this program on Presidents in Florida. Jim, let's start out with you first. Just talk about this. You wrote the book, Presidents in Florida. Let's just talk about the topic of why Presidents in Florida and what made it so interesting that, one, you wanted to write a book about it, and then we made a documentary about it.
Yeah, I was fascinated that Florida now is the third largest state. And until President Trump, we had never had a president. We had never had a presidential nominee. We had never had a vice presidential nominee, nothing. And it fascinated me that Vermont's had two presidents. Hawaii now has had a president. And it took us this long to get a president who moved here just last year or year before. So I was fascinated by the topic, but also how different presidents interacted with Florida, beginning with George Washington. Even though we did not join the United States until 1821, our relations with presidents began during the American Revolution.
So this is something that has gone on forever. And like you say, this has affected presidencies throughout, all the way from Washington, all the way up through Trump. And now I'm sure in the Biden administration as well. So Florida has played a key part in that all along the way. One of the big parts of that has been the space program, and it has touched many, many presidents throughout that. Laurie, let's talk about, you're a historian and particularly know a lot about the Brevard County area. Let's talk about how the space program has really affected Brevard County and turned it from the sleepy little community into the technology center that it is today.
Okay, well, prior to the arrival of the space program here in Florida, Brevard County was a relatively small county. And so with the arrival of the space program, with the first launch of Bumper 8 in 1950, what we see is a small, slow progression of development as a result of the space and missile industry. It's not like, a lot of people think that we have this flood and all of a sudden all these tens of thousands of people are coming. No, it's not. Really, it's restricted to the change of the old Banana River Naval Air Station becomes Patrick Air Force Base and the administrative headquarters, and then the launch facilities are up at Cape Canaveral. And so this is how it stays throughout the early 1950s and maybe into 1957, where we have this slow progression. People come, people go. They're here to test a missile, but they're not here to really set roots, well, a lot of them. Some do, but a lot of them don't. They're here from, the Glenn L. Martin Company for a period of time. They're here from, Douglas for a period of time, but then they go back to their home base. Sputnik changes everything. With Sputnik, what we start to see is more folks come and arrive here and stay here in Brevard County, because now what we have, thanks to Sputnik in 1957, is we have NASA. And so with NASA, we have a manned space effort. And so with the manned space effort, we have more and more folks arriving, and Brevard County grows, and we get more shopping facilities and such. And then the final thing that changes everything for Brevard County is in 1961, when Kennedy makes his lunar pledge. With Project Apollo, all of a sudden you get more and more folks that are coming here to set their roots. We get developments, large developments throughout Brevard County. We also get the arrival of the Merritt Island Launch Facility on Merritt Island, which we now call the Kennedy Space Center. And so with that, then we get what we all see today in our minds as this rush of folk coming to Central Florida. And with that, it changes everything. It changes universities. We get FIT, we get, UCF, we get shopping facilities, everything changes.
Now, and it amazes me is the way that the space program just completely transformed the community. I mean, you like to say you had all these hotels that were named after these space names and just completely engulfed the community and really transformed not only just the business side of things, but also the technology, just the atmosphere of the way people lived in Brevard County.
Mm-hmm. Yes, in the late 1950s, you get the Astrocraft and the Satellite Motel and the Polaris, and you get all of these space-themed drinks and bars and everything. And so the space program really takes a hold of part of the culture of Brevard County. And I can tell you specifically more for Cocoa Beach than I can other areas of Brevard. But for Cocoa Beach, definitely, it really becomes a part of the city's identity. It becomes Miscelange USA. And so that says much. Mm-hmm.
Okay, Amy, let's talk about the ups and downs of the space program, because I don't think a lot of people realize that. I mean, this goes all the way back to Truman when he first started with the missile testing site there, and it's gone through every president since then. But the space program is really kind of an up and down situation. Is whatever the administration is and whatever their commitment is to space, I mean, that can completely change the whole look of what the space program is. So talk a little bit about how the ups and downs have affected the space program through the years.
You're absolutely right there. So presidential leadership is key to what NASA is going to be doing at any particular point in time. So NASA is a federal agency. It gets its budget as part of the federal budget. And even the NASA administrator is a presidential appointee. So, that really shapes a lot of kind of NASA's mission during those different administrations. We often think about John F. Kennedy as being kind of the major impetus behind so much of what we think about when we think about the space program, because he commits us to put men on the moon. And that ultimately defined the rest of that decade. So it's May of 1961 that he makes that announcement that we're going to go to the moon, and that will define everything through 1969 when we finally land. And after that, presidential interest wanes. When we do land on the moon, it's actually Richard Nixon who's in office, and he was not that much of a space buff, and so we see kind of this kind of a bit of a retrenchment under Reagan, or excuse me, under Nixon, because that wasn't so much of his focus. And the Apollo program was supposed to go through Apollo 20, and it ends with Apollo 17 because the budget gets repeatedly slashed. On top of that, Nixon as a Republican is thinking about a budget as well as much as anything, and so let's refocus what NASA will be doing for something purposeful. And that's actually when we get the space shuttle. It's Richard Nixon who's actually going to approve funding to move forward with the space shuttle in early January 1972. So it redefines very much what the space program was going to be about, just based on that presidential leadership.
And that's something that, it goes on now and now. You see more and more presidents. You didn't really used to see a lot of presidents actually showing up for these launches, but now it's more of a, I guess it's when everyone wants to be seen in the right places at the right time. Now you're seeing more and more of that type of thing at these space events.
Well, I think, so much of the space program has always been about prestige. It's certainly that's how Kennedy treated it. He treated it like an element of the Cold War. This was an opportunity to show our muscle against the Soviet Union. And so having a presence for those big launches and those successes are something that the presidents can take at least some level of responsibility for. So there's a lot of pride. There's no doubt if you've ever gotten the chance to be at a launch, they're powerful, they're emotional. I sometimes laugh, I sometimes cry, because they are impressive. And to be a part of that really is something rather patriotic.
Let's go back and talk about, Jim, the history of the space program here. As far as it seems like it makes perfect sense for it to be on the Cape. It's the perfect spot and all of that. But this was, I mean, they really had to work to get this here. This wasn't a dead ringer, so to speak, of, oh, that's the perfect spot. It had to go through some other locations and some other thinking before it finally wound up here in Florida.
Yeah, as Lori and Amy know, and Lori and Amy can talk to this, it's almost by fluke that it ends up here in Florida. The original plan was to launch out west, right, Lori?
Yes. Well, actually, you look at where some of the original launches were, but what makes Brevard County ideal in 1950 is that it has, because some of the earlier launches, they actually had one that went awry and landed in Juarez, Mexico. and so it is not very good public relations with your neighbor to the south when a missile goes awry and lands in, its country. And so Cape Canaveral was selected for a variety of reasons. One of the primary reasons is that its location is near the equator, and the closer you get to the equator, the easier and more it helps propel something into orbit, so you don't need as large an engine. So that's a very important thing. The next is that you have cheap availability of property. Property at Cape Canaveral and Brevard County at that moment in time was relatively inexpensive. If a missile goes crazy and happens to land in Brevard County or a neighboring county, well, in 1950, 51, 52, there's not that many folk there. And also, what's really, really important is you got to remember the technology at the time was very limited, and so tracking. And so by virtue of being at the Cape, you have all of these nice tracking facilities all the way down to the South Atlantic. And so, that plays into a factor as well. So there's many, many reasons. And also there was, of course, the availability of the Banana River Naval Air Station, which became Patrick Air Force Base. So you had this facility that was already there that they didn't have to build up immediately, and that could act as the administrative headquarters. So there were a lot of great factors that came into play as to why it became here in Brevard County.
Let's talk about also the fact that I know one of the topics, Amy, that you talk about a lot is, and you've researched a lot, is women in space. Let's talk a little bit about, if you could, about the transformation of the space program. Originally, it was thought this is a man's job, but women have, like in everything else, have made their mark and made their space in the space program. Talk a little bit about that and how that has changed through the years and how it will continue to change.
Sure. So yeah, when we think about the early space program, and certainly the most public face is the astronaut corps, and it was male, and Eisenhower had said he wanted test pilots. I mean, we were doing something very experimental, and he wanted people to be in a capsule that who had experienced potentially deadly situations and be able to handle it. So, we need test pilots for that. Well, if you look at who was a test pilot in the late 1950s and early 1960s, it's still men, and it's men that come out of the military. Women were not allowed to be a part of the armed forces in terms of the flying corps. They participated in World War II in ferrying aircraft and all that, but they weren't flying jet aircraft in the 1950s, and they weren't doing it in the military, and they weren't being test pilots. So until some of those requirements start to change, then women are left out of the astronaut corps. But women still were very active at NASA. So one of the things that we think of in terms of women's opportunities, for the astronaut corps, they need to be in those pipeline careers. So when the space shuttle comes along, we're hiring more scientists, we're hiring more engineers, and we're hiring physicians to fly as astronauts. Well, women have now had the opportunity to work in some of those fields. But when we think of, women on the ground working behind the scenes, there were women getting, college degrees in mathematics in particular. And so there's actually a fairly long history of women working with the space program, and actually going back all the way to the late 19th century and doing astronomical calculations. So when NASA is created in 1958 and we're doing some of these early experiments with rockets, there are women who are actually crunching the numbers and doing the mathematical elements of the engineering for the male engineers to then take and put into a rocket. So there's quite a few women out at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in California. There are women who are working in Virginia, and that's, and you know, we now have the story Hidden Figures since the book came out and now the movie came out. So we know about women like Katherine Johnson, who are also women of color, who had the opportunity to get training in the sciences and in mathematics, and who could actually contribute to the space program by being the people who were doing the mathematical calculations. But one of the really interesting things is even when the Jet Propulsion Laboratory actually started to get physical computers, the male engineers actually had the female mathematicians double check the numbers of the computers because they didn't yet trust the computers. They trusted the women.
All right, let's talk about just the future of where we're going with the space program. And I'll throw this open to any three of you that want to have a comment about it. So jump right in at any time. But just talk about the future of where we are now, not only in Brevard and what the space program will mean to Brevard County and the future and to the state of Florida, but just about the space program itself and where it's going. So anyone who wants to take that one, feel free to jump in and go.
Lori, you want to go?
Well, I'm more of a 50s and 60s person, but I can certainly try. Okay. Well, I think it's fascinating. And actually, I think it's really great the fact that our launches now are still being held here at Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. For somebody who looks back to the 50s and 60s as I do, and I saw, you know, what happened with the dismantlement of everything out at the old ICBM row. And then I go, I cry about that, but then I say, you know, it's designed to progress, and it is progressing. And the next step is, you know, not necessarily all government. It's going to have to be with private industry. And as such, I think Brevard County is still going to, you know, get a significant portion of the missile, you know, I shouldn't say missile, because I want to say the space industry. You know, because the missile industry is something, you know, quite different. So I think there always is going to be a space program here in Florida. I think that at times it will be more significant than others, but I think it will always be here. I think what Florida has learned, thanks in part to that severe economic downturn that we had here in Brevard County in the 1970s, you have to diversify. And I think they're learning that. And so that the space program isn't as big a chunk of who we are as it was in the 50s and 60s. And I don't think it ever will be as big a chunk as it was in the 50s and 60s. But that's in part to diversification.
All right, let's talk, Jim. Go ahead, whoever.
No,
I was going to add, you know, I think Lori's right. So first, I don't think NASA is ever going to go away. When Lori mentioned kind of the decline that we saw in the 1970s, that comes a lot from the budget. So the federal budget implementation that went to NASA, it peaked in 1966 at 6.5%, and it has declined down to about 0.5% ever since the 1970s, and that hasn't changed. But NASA has done a lot of the groundwork. And I think, you know, even as we're seeing dismantling of old launch facilities, we are seeing the rebuilding of new launch facilities. And I think one of the things that NASA brings to the picture is that long institutional history of how to do this, as well as a great body of knowledge. And so to be able to partner with up and coming companies in the space program like SpaceX and Blue Origins and Boeing is really exciting. And it's consistent with what we saw actually with the aviation field in the 1920s. So this new partnership is going to keep things, I think, vibrant. It won't be like we saw during the Apollo program. I think Lori's is absolutely right on that. But we're always going to have a part here just because we have that long history, and history matters. That memory matters.
Buddy, I was going to mention that one of the strange things to me is the lack of correlation between presidents celebrating the space program and cutting the budget at the same time. Just, you know, for example, and maybe Lori and Amy disagree with me, but Lyndon Johnson was the leading champion of going to space, and he gets almost no recognition.
Yes, he was.
Nixon, because of the moon landing on his watch, gets tremendous credit, but as Amy pointed out, he was slicing the budget while celebrating. We see people show up at the Cape who get on TV, presidents, and then go back to Washington and slash the budget.
Well, Lyndon Johnson was present, even though he was no longer president, but he was president for the Apollo 11 launch. Richard Nixon was not. Agnew went in his stead. So he didn't, yeah, so Nixon didn't come to the Apollo 11 launch, but you have the famous telephone call, you know, Neil and Buzz, this is me speaking to you from the Oval Office, la, 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 la. Yeah, yeah. But Johnson really had a lot of interest in the space program. And I was looking at he not only understood the influence of the space program just from an economic standpoint at that moment in time, he understood, I was reading, he came to Florida Atlantic University in 1964 to open the institution. And if you read his speech, he talks about the need for STEM and the need for this type of education to make certain that we are at the forefront of the space program in next year and the year after that and the decade after that. So it's very telling that how he really did fervently believe in the space. Mm-hmm.
And yet it's Kennedy who we associate with the space program in that era, not Johnson.
Right. And Kennedy was not that supportive of the space program. Yeah. I mean, his decision to say that we're going to go to the moon was because he needed a political win. Things were not going in his favor. The Bay of Pigs had just happened, which didn't end well for Kennedy, and he needed a win. And so he turned to his vice president, LBJ, who was definitely a supporter of the space program, and James Webb, who was the administrator at the time, and said, what can we do? How can we beat the Soviets? And they said, we can get to the moon first. And that's Kennedy's legacy. And it's fascinating that he gets the credit when, he never really was the strongest proponent of the space program, but as presidents go.
I think it's interesting also to look at where we are now, and we talked about this some in the documentary about the importance of the partnerships, and that is the future of the space program. Used to, the federal government pretty much carried the load on all of this, but now it's becoming a business that other outside companies are able to join in and turn into a profitable business as well. So I think that's the future. It helps keep the cost down for the government, and it also helps keep the space program going. So I think, if maybe you agree, is the fact that partnerships is the way of the future for this whole thing.
I think in a lot of ways, the whole space program has been built on partnerships. Everything that we put into space is not built by NASA necessarily. I mean, there's a lot of design that was happening at NASA and construction at NASA sites, but a lot of the capsules were built by different companies, by Northrop, by Grumman. Grumman built the lunar lander, and that's all private industry. Hamilton Beach built the suits. It's always been a partnership, but with NASA very much as the lead and the providers of those contracts. And now it's definitely money coming from the outside that's now working together and building that base. And so there's as opposed to a kind of a boss and contractor kind of relationship, it's definitely much more of a partnership. But I think, NASA has a long history of working well with other companies. And so now that, like I say, we have this institutional base and knowledge and outside wealth, because that still is very important. We look at the companies that are making big moves in the space program, and we're talking people like Tesla and Amazon. That's a lot of money coming from those bodies that can bolster what NASA is capable of doing. And it's really exciting for that reason.
And we'd like to remind the folks listening and watching right now, if you have a question in the chat line down there, go ahead and type in a question. We'd love to have our panelists answer some of those for you. We've only got a few minutes left, so if you would go ahead and type those in. Laurie, let's talk about when this whole program started back in the 50s. Do you think at any point the people that were involved in this and were there envisioned this growing to where it is today?
You know, I think in the early 1950s, no, I honestly believe that it wasn't until Sputnik that people understood that the space I shouldn't say the space program, that the military efforts were going to stay at Cape Canaveral. And once we have Sputnik and then Apollo, you know, if you look at some of the ephemera from the era, and they talk about this great technology triangle that was going to go from Melbourne to the Cape out to Bitslow, and how much, you know, expansion there was going to be. People thought that this was going to be never ending. And, you know, ultimately it did end. You know, I always look to Titusville City Hall, and I think I'm still on track with you. I looked at Titusville City Hall, and it opened in 1967 for their 100th anniversary, their centennial. And if you look at Titusville City Hall, my God, it is a beautiful city hall. It really speaks to a community that was looking to the future, and the future was going to be fantastic, all due to the space program. Nobody could have foresaw, nobody had that crystal ball on the hand to understand that in 1970, everything was going to go down with the tidy bowl man. You know, but I think by the 60s, they really thought that it was going to be here for a very, very long period of time. And at that rate, yes.
All right, we do have a question that just came in, and I don't know, Amy, if you want to take it, or Laurie, or Jim, either one. The question is, will NASA actually achieve what Trump's administration planned to launch humans and possibly the first woman to the lunar system by 2024? Do we think that is still on track?
It's probably not on track. You know, Jim Bridenstine, who was the NASA administrator under Trump, you know, had been asking for more money for that development, and he didn't get it. So I think that timeline is likely to slip, but I think it will still happen. One of the things that President Biden has made clear is, you know, his emphasis for the space program is going to be largely environmental. You know, so, you know, using space technology to monitor and track changes on the planet itself, and that still means money coming in. But you know, I think the programs that are in place to return us to the moon, I think there's a lot of desire and emphasis there. And I don't think that will simply go away, but I think that timeline probably will slip.
All right, Jim, let me go back and ask you a question real quick, stemming away from the space program for just a little bit now, just talking about the Presidents in Florida documentary that you helped us produce. Just talk a little bit about where do you think this the state of Florida will it continue to play a key role and touch every presidency in some way as it has done since George Washington? I assume it probably will. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think a couple of things interest me. One is that we now have 29 and a couple more. We'll go up to 31 electoral votes in a couple of years. And so we are going to become more important. We're kind of a swing state. It went for Obama in a couple elections, and then went for President Trump in this last election. So it really is going to continue to be a political battleground. But also, you know, presidents don't come here like they used to. President Trump's the exception. You know, John Kennedy had a home here. The Bush family had a couple of homes here. And going by Harry Truman spent presidency in Key West. And presidents now come here largely to raise money and to hold political events and then go home. We don't have presidents coming and staying and vacationing like they once did.
Well, I want to thank all of you for joining us tonight and for helping us out once again, not only with this event this evening and discussing the space program and also just the documentary, but I want to thank you all again, Jim, Amy, and Laurie, for taking part and being such a valuable part of our documentary. And if you could, I'd like to tell the folks who are watching that you can go on to our website and watch the entire documentary, wucf.org/presidents in Florida, and enjoy the entire hour-long documentary that takes us from George Washington all the way up through the past administration. So, Jim, Laurie, Amy, thank you all for being with us this evening. Thank you all for watching with us this evening. And we hope you will go to wucf.org/presidents in Florida and watch the entire documentary. Once again, thanks for being with us. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.